Welcome to another of our Wednesday Yachting Luncheons, live from the St. Francis Yacht Club. Holy moly, it's beautiful to be here looking out the windows of our beautiful bay. Where else can you have lunch and get the beautiful view at the same time? Right off the bat, we want to introduce something we're very proud of, our first female Commodore, a very active and tremendous contributor to our club. Welcome, Commodore Teresa Brandner.
Thank you, Ron, and hopefully not the last female Commodore. But welcome, everyone, members and guests, those of you viewing online and in various parts of the world. It's always a pleasure to welcome you here, and we have a great speaker today. It's actually a little bit dreary here in San Francisco, so we're hoping the fog lifts, and we're also getting ready for Big Boat Series next week, the World X Big Boat Series, so hopefully you can watch our results online if you're not local, or you can participate, which I'm going to do. I'll be out there racing my J105. So let's, I guess I'm excited for the speaker today. Enough about me, and I'll hand over the mic back to Ron to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Teresa. So yacht clubs are these combination of traditions and social relationships, and so the Member Engagement Committee has proposed, and we've now implemented. Today's the first kind of active day of the month where we're implementing something you might have read about in the main sheet called the K-Flag program. When new members come to our yacht club, they look around and they see that staff commodores and officers have a flag on the table, a small table flag to recognize their contribution that they're making to our club. Well, beginning today, new members to the Yacht Club for the first month also get their own flag, the K-Flag. And so the board has approved this program. The K-Flag program has started. And so if you see this flag, you recognize this is somebody in their first month of membership in our club. And you know exactly what to do. Show them the incredible hospitality and gracious company that all of our members, share with our new members and each other. So we hope this will make it easier for each of us to find the new members in our club and welcome them. Let's see, a little bit about future speakers. We only have 2 open speaking slots between now and the end of the year. And so starting the Forest, you want to come by in December on the 12th, Gary Jepsen, perhaps the premier spokesperson and ambassador of Sailing for America Worldwide will be here to give a talk. Let's see, talk about November 14th, Bob Heller, former governor of the Federal Reserve Board, will be here to talk about the relationship between interest rates, inflation, and the economy. And then you want to come by in October. Tony and Landon, the creators of 30 Knot Gourmet, will be here to talk about how you can have something other than black coffee and pork and beans when you race someplace or sail anywhere offshore. That'll be a fascinating talk. They are literally 30 Knot Gourmet is famous for having great cuisine on boats. You'll want to come by and listen to learn more about submarines from Adam Wright. These are small, 2-person, single-person submarines. Deep flight submarines will be here to talk all about that adventure. Dave McGuire will be here in the early part of October. He is the founder of Shark Stewards and a scientist. He'll talk all about the importance of sharks to the ecosystem and how endangered they are because of shark fin soup and other kinds of souvenir hunters and fishermen. We don't want those folks to be hurting our shark population. And Michael Webster, Executive Director of the Coral Reef Foundation, will be here on September 19th to talk about coral reefs. They are in danger, and yet they contribute a tremendous amount of food to human beings. They are one part of the food cycle in the ocean, and they're very, very important, and they're in danger. We need to learn what we can do to help them survive. And next week, Daniel Forrester will be here to talk about being one of the world's premier yachting photographers. He's shot every Olympics and every America's Cup since he started over 30 years ago, and he's a fascinating speaker, and he can talk to you about the technical details and also the incredible fun it is to basically make a living doing what everybody else spends their time ogling, that is to say, watching yacht racing up close. A little bit about our speaker today. He started sailing at age 5 on the family catboat on the Charles River. If you've sailed in the Charles River, you know it's actually a beautiful place to sail. In the winter, you can frostbite there I've been by MIT and Harvard, and you can also sail up the river more and down the river more. It's an incredibly fun place to start sailing. And he, like many people who've sailed all their lives, started as a family sailor in a family sailing tradition. By age 14, he had his first and pretty much only solo-owned boat. He had a Cape Cod Mercury. Those of us who've sailed Mercuries, realize that Mercuries are incredibly fun, and if you can make them go fast, you're truly talented. That's what makes them such incredibly brilliant one-design boats. His was not like the chine bottom Mercuries we see on the West Coast. It was a 16-footer, a little smaller, but it got him ready to take what would be a 2-week cruise a year later at age 15. 5 folks, that is to say his whole family, mother, father, he is the 15-year-old oldest, then the 13-year-old and the 9-year-old on the boat. All 5 of them went on their Bristol 27 from Boston to Nantucket through the canal on the Cape and back again. What a great way to spend 2 weeks and to really get to know your family. 27-foot boat, no secrets. He basically joined the Air Force, said, don't have enough dough to go straight to college. I'm going to go join the Air Force first. So he was very savvy, joined the Air Force, and at age 21, with the GI Bill, went back to school, became a student, and then got a gig as a, guess what, sailing instructor at the Annapolis Sailing School. And so a couple years later, he moved to Santa Clara, started going to school at San Jose State in meteorology. There's a cool thing for a sailor to learn about, meteorology. And a year later, met Anthony Sandberg, who had created and was embryonically forming the Olympic Circle Sailing School. And so essentially he became, if you can't, I'd say founder, and they say founder, and Anthony says founder of what is now one of the top 5 sailing schools / clubs in the country. 38 years later, they've trained 30,000 sailors in their 12-month program, and it's really a pleasure to meet, I know Rich, and to introduce such a great contributor to our sport. Please welcome Rich Jepsen, co-founder, Olympic Circle Sailing Club.
Thank you, Ron. That was very kind of you. I appreciate that. Hello, everyone. Thanks for spending your afternoon with me. I want to start by saying we started our business in 1979, which was actually kind of a red letter day in sailing's history in the U.S. It was, until very recently, the peak of sailing's popularity in 1979. So what a way to buy at the top of the market. It was like buying a house on September 1st, 2008. But what's interesting about this was that we were near the vanguard of a new way of growing the sport, one that wasn't even measured until mid-1980s. Commercial sailing clubs were creating a bevy of new sailors who were developing skills and knowledge for years before entering into the boat purchase market. And commercial programs were mainstreaming for adults that which had already been done for youth, providing public access to sailing with club-owned boats, leased equipment, and a social magnet similar to the yacht club model that we're all familiar with. As for me, my path was a bit weird into this new paradigm of sailing. As Ron said, I was in the military for 4 years, and I actually got involved in teaching sailing because I got into trouble my last 6 months in the Air Force. If you've served in the military, you may know something called an Article 15. I was this close. And I was young, I was immature, stupid, and insubordinate, I think was the term my CO used. So he was a sailor, luckily, and instead of giving me an Article 15, he said, okay, you have a month. Here's an ad. Go down, apply for this sailing instructor job, teach on the weekends when you're not working, and see if you can't stay out of trouble for your last 6 months. Because the Air Force isn't for you, and I can tell you, you're not for the Air Force. So Annapolis Sailing School happened, and I fell in love with teaching sailing and vowed that I was, while I had already learned that there's not a way to make a living, I knew that I was going to be teaching sailing as I made my career in meteorology. I moved to California for college, as Ron said, and it wasn't too long into my meteorology degree that I met Anthony. Totally was struck, definitely a bromance of magnificent proportions. Everything that I thought about sailing, everything I thought about the world, he was also saying. So we became fast friends and business partners in very short order. So fast forward to now, I've 4 years retired from Olympic Circle and filling my life with lots of volunteer work for the sport. Over the years, I've learned a ton of what makes sailing a lifetime experience for folks, and I'll share some of those observations today. I hope to demonstrate, though, that sailing's healthy, it's evolving, and it's got a bright future. Just a little bit about my background. Like I said, 5 years old, 1960, Dad dropped me in the water, and by the time I was 5, I could stay afloat for 60 seconds, that was the rule, and then he let me come sailing. I joined Olympic Circle back in 1980 and St. Francis in 87. I've been a volunteer for U.S. Sailing since 1995, and I'm a board member there and a board member of a local community sailing center, Alameda Community Sailing, and then a bunch of other volunteer stuff around boating safety and sailor education, National Boating Safety Advisory Council for the Coast Guard, National Association of State Boating Law Administrators, and things like that. So that's me on the right, and I haven't changed a bit. It said, love what you do and you'll never work another day in your life. It's also said, you can grow up or you can become a sailor, but not both. This is what I'll talk about. Thoughts on sailing's health and pretty much what U.S. sailing and sailing industry think tanks are saying about our sport nowadays. We've learned a ton about the needs of new sailors and how to develop a lifelong love of sailing. And I'll present those ideas and give some examples of them in use. I'll also give you a brief menu of the programs that exist public access-wise in the Bay Area. And I will brag a little bit about Olympic Circle's model. That's the one I know best. And I'll also show you some pictures of faraway charter locations, which is part of our model. Also, they're just gratuitous, pretty pictures. And community sailing, I will talk about a couple of models. They often toil in secret. They don't get a ton of coverage from the sailing magazines or from the tops of our sailing newsletters, whether it's Sailing Illustrated or Scuttlebutt or Sailing Anarchy. They are seldom mentioned. But I think they're quietly revolutionizing our sport and turning it into something that will thrive in the 21st century. One really exciting initiative that some of you may already be aware of, Carissa Harris Adamson's Treasure Island Sailing Center is rolling out an initiative called Puddles to Podiums, essentially starting with the end in mind to take kids from A to Z in terms of their sailing careers. I'll discuss that a bit, and perhaps I'll learn a bit from all of you about their new program, which I will wait to name. All right, so lots of sailing trade magazines and industry blogs decry sailing's trend. Fewer people, fewer boats purchased, boats unattended for years, lack of Olympic success. I think all those are real problems. but I offer that sailing is evolving and maybe under the radar a little bit and healthier than you might think. Here are some facts and figures from the latest State of the Industry report that Bonnier Publishing rolled out recently. So in 2005, those numbers, essentially 3 million sailors, were 1% of the population. In 2016, at 4 million, they represented 1.4% of the population. So gross number increase and a percentage of the population increase. Part of this increase, for sure, is the fact that U.S. Sailing just did a complete renovation and revolution of its mission from a top-down governing organization to a customer-focused serviced organization. I think that's had great results in terms of bringing more sailors back to U.S. Sailing. But I think it's also a trend consistent with the increase in overall sailors in the sport. Here's just another example of the fact that sailing activity is happening in greater numbers than it has in the past. And I want to say in the preceding numbers, you notice I stayed away from boat and equipment purchases. I believe those are good measures of the industry, but not so much measures of the popularity of sailing itself. I propose that these numbers say that sailing's healthy and healthier than it was 10 years ago. Sailing's evolving with the population. Boat ownership is still healthy. 78% of sailors own their own boats. But have you heard it said that millennials are more fond of having experiences than of owning things? Shared use of boats, whether at a private club like ours, we have our J22s, or at public access, it's tailor-made for this new generation. I do believe sailing has its challenges. When teens find the opposite sex, we lose a few of them. When they get a non-sailing job, when they get their driver's license, sailing finds it hard to compete. Even for those who remain active through college, they get a job, they get married, they have kids, and they struggle to buy a home, especially in this area, and it's very hard to fit sailing back into their lives. We get some in their 30s coming back, but many more who just never make it back after that 10-year hiatus. And there are other challenges. Olympic competitiveness, we can't argue with the numbers. Imports of boats are hurting the U.S. sailing or U.S.-built boat market. There's a glut of older used boats, of course, in the U.S. All those things are troubling, but that's for another talk. Today I'll stick with what is working. Who knows a 501c3 service organization offering public access sailing? Anybody have a candidate? Yes? Yes, ma'am. Yes, and BADS is more of a cooperative. I think it is a 501c3, but they operate as a cooperative. Yes, that's good. Treasure Island Sailing Center, of course, is a 501c3, along with Alameda Community Sailing, of which I'm a board member. Sailing Education Adventures. Anybody know where that is? San Rafael. Guess how long they've been operating? 40 years. 40 years under the radar. They've trained thousands of kids, and they have a specialty that focuses on micro-environmental stuff, biology, tide pool education, and they combine that with sailing for all the kids in the San Rafael, Marin City areas. Another one, which is run by a colleague of mine, Peninsula Youth Sailing Foundation, another 501c3, who's really focused on making kids as good as sailors and racers as they can be, and they have several youth national champions on their roster. How about true cooperatives? Yes? Cal Sailing Club with a perfect segue.
1,000 members every summer.
The cheapest unlimited sailing in the state. And they do a great job, and of course they're sailing in a spectacular location, and there's skills you can develop at Cal Sailing Club, sailing their small boats in that breeze that you can't get anyplace else. Marin Blind Sailors. I'm not sure I have the name right, but there's a nascent blind sailing organization that's cooperative. How about municipal? Lake Merritt Boathouse is an Oakland-run program and provides great access to anybody who wants to sail without worry about being able to afford it. Shoreline Aquatic Center in Mountain View. University programs right next to Cal Sailing Club. Cal Adventures is a university-run program, but it does have public access. And then, of course, all of our commercial schools, Olympic Circle, Club Nautique, Spinnaker, Tradewinds, Modern Sailing Academy. Who did I leave out? San Francisco Bay Sailing School. So that's close to 20 public access programs just here in the Central Bay area. And there's one starting up at the Old Cast Marina called Sausalito Community Sailing Center, run by a former instructor of mine, Heather Richards, which you're going to be hearing more about because they're organizing themselves, doing some fundraising, and should be open for business in a few months. So pathways are sort of the buzzword in community sailing nowadays. There's many ways you can get introduced, but only a precious few ways that will result in that person developing a lifelong relationship with sailing. Those avenues can be quite different for different people in the Bay Area, partly due to our geography, our oceanography, our meteorology. We can provide many different paths. Competition's a path, adventure is a path, and many youth and adults use it primarily just to have something in common with the people they like and love. And some people just find messing around in boats to be its own reward. And of course, they're all intertwined. None of us does it for simply one reason. We've learned at US Sailing that youth sailing with adults, especially as a family unit, is the single biggest correlative factor in developing lifelong sailors. That pathway needs to be expanded a lot. I think there's a lot we could do there. That's very fertile ground. So to OCSC, the adult model is one of many on-ramps for adult sailing. As you guys know, joining the yacht club and crewing for members is one great on-ramp. Taking the adult sailing programs that we have here at the yacht club work. Friends invite you and mentor you, or you take a charter in Paradise as a new sailor and you hire a skipper, and that skipper spends half his time teaching you how to sail and half his time serving you drinks. But of course, I'm partial to my former business, and I know that model the best, so I'm going to use that as an example. We've developed this model over 25 years of our existence with trial and error and a bit of lucky timing. But first I'll say 15% of our membership buys a boat every year. So while I don't know the exact numbers, I know that many St. Francis members got their starts at Olympic Circle, and I know that applies to all the other commercial and not-for-profit public access programs in the Bay Area. So at OCSC, while we love having our 20-year and 30-year long members, we do realize we're a gateway to more traditional forms of the sport, and we have many of our clients matriculate to racing J105s and joining the St. Francis Yacht Club. So our first model, our first line that you saw there, Inspire Confidence, that's our branding motto, if you will. And it goes to this problem. The single biggest reason that adults don't stick with sailing is they didn't receive enough training and mentoring to become confident in their skills. And so they would always find reasons not to go, because every time they went, it was a stressful experience because they didn't feel comfortable. So that's what drives everything that we do at Olympic Circle. It drove our move of our school from Alameda, where we started, to Berkeley, a rocky, windy lee shore. It hasn't been an easy path, but it did result in our turning out confident sailors, one of the key indicators of whether somebody will stay with the sport. Our model is to expose sailors to everything Mother Nature will throw at them under the guidance and protection of an instructor. So when they're ready to take that J24 out in 20 knots of breeze and fog out of the Berkeley Marina, they have zero problems because they've done it dozens of times before. Also, for this to compete with boat ownership, it has to be convenient. And we learned early on that sailors get into sailing for more than one reason. But the biggest reason they get into sailing is because they want a bareboat charter a boat in paradise. So that's 80% of our clients when they come in to learn how to sail. That's their stated reason. That's their end in mind. So we had to make the preparation for that adventure very thorough, but it required more than just training. The easiest part was to ensure the members felt at home whenever they were at OCSC. We did take our social model from yacht clubs, and we paid very close attention to what worked and what didn't in yacht clubs. But we developed a social construct that kept people interested in coming down to OCSC, whether or not they were going sailing that day. But it is really about sailing, and we make it convenient enough to serve as a short-term alternative to owning a boat with 50 boats from 24 to 50 feet. So anytime anybody wants to go sailing at Olympic Circle, they can do so with just a phone call. Because it's exciting and confidence building and socially interesting, most members, even those who were specifically deciding to purchase a boat when they decided to learn to sail, will delay that boat purchase and stay at OCSC as long as 3 to 5 years because they're learning so much, they're sailing a wide variety of boats, and when it finally comes time for them to buy their boat, they are an incredibly educated consumer. And of course, there needs to be that social construct. This is a Christmas party at Olympic Circle, but it's not the only thing we do. There's something every week going on that is either purely social or social educational, sometimes on the water, sometimes in the clubhouse, just like here at St. Francis, and it's the final leg of that stool. So creating adventure is a way of keeping clients, but it's also a way of building their love for the sport. So preparing them for that adventure of bareboat chartering in the Caribbean, for let's say, is important, but helping them have that adventure is just as helpful in making that lifelong sailor develop. Charter flotillas have been around for almost as long as the charter industry itself. They provide support to nervous and new sailors. But we offer a variation on this by first ensuring that our sailors from Olympic Circle are perfectly competent to do that without any of the trappings of a flotilla. And we do send along on our flotillas a leader, if you will, but that person's less of a leader than a butler or concierge, and there to help them if they need it, but otherwise they have all the independence that they would have if they went by themselves. And I think these memorable experiences of going someplace exotic and sailing your own boat, being your own captain, really connects them with sailing in a unique way. So does anybody know what that is? Yell it out.
It's not Rainbow Warrior.
No. No, but it is a double rainbow. That's the Willie T. Willie T in the BVI. It is no more. But a new Willie T is being anchored in Peter Island, I think, this month or next. Then some more gratuitous flotilla shots. Anybody know which mooring anchorage this is? It looks like the bitter end, but I thought it was Norman Island and from Pirates Beach Cafe. I just took this spring when I was there. Next one, turquoise coast of Turkey. Has anybody sailed in Turkey? Yeah, I think it's the sexiest place to sail in the world. Then Thailand, this is at Pipidon. Yes, there is an island named Pipidon. And also in Thailand, this is up north where James Bond Island is. And I'm taking this from a cave undercut by wave action, wearing away the limestone of this huge, tall limestone pillar. Really incredible. Croatia, anybody? Hvar Town. And also Croatia is the key at Korčula, another incredibly beautiful place. So this one is a bit out of sequence. Or this one is back to the Caribbean. This is St. Kitts and overlooking Nevis. Anybody know what that boat's called? A, right, yes. Owned by a Russian oligarch. St. Bart's, another sort of Leeward Island sunset. This is near the Peloponnese Peninsula in the Saronic Gulf in Greece. This is one of my favorite places, a little town called Kea in Greece. Kea, the island, Kea, the town. And you tie up right next to where you get your lattes. Just a wonderful place. Okay, last, I think this is the two more quizzes. So this place is tiny harbor, Saronic Gulf of Greece, where in August yachts are rafted bow to stern, 7 deep. Anyone know its name? Yeah, you don't count. It's called Hydra, Hydra, and it is so popular because it's so close to Athens that they, in this tiny little space that can't be bigger than 2 football fields, they stuff like 80 charter yachts every day from July through August. It's amazing. BVI, the baths, right. All right, enough of the gratuitous charter photos. On to the other model. So youth is the other model, and it's, even though I spent my lifetime teaching adults, this has now become very near and dear to my heart. I've discovered youth sailing in my late years and volunteer for Alameda Community Sailing. So what's different introducing youth into sailing? Well, number one, kids play differently than adults. They learn by experimenting. They learn by play. So less instruction, more play works better. Adults are exactly the opposite. Well, they tell themselves they're exactly the opposite. I'm here to tell you that they love to play if they let themselves. A good number of kids fall in love with competitive sailing, just like they do falling in love with soccer, football, basketball. But an equal number of kids find the structure and stress of competitive sailing not fun, uninteresting, or at least they burn out too soon. So Pathways to Sailing for Life for kids is a multifaceted process. Kids fall into a few categories. Those who are there for the independence of operating their own vehicle, which don't underestimate how important that is. Those who like a challenge, those who are competitive, and those whose parents consider sailing camp superior to childcare. Teens of different needs than 8-year-olds, as well as more competing options for their time, more independence, and they've discovered the opposite sex. They also want more intellectual challenge, power, complexity in the sailing platform that they use, and most importantly, they need help with the social scene. Being on a 4-person or more crew on a keelboat gives them all of those things. So there may not be any single secret sauce, but I think the secret sauce is recognizing that it takes a variety of well thought out initiatives to keep kids in sailing and to make it a lifelong activity for them. So here's what we at US Sailing think we've learned. 25% of kids sail specifically because they love to race. They sail to race. 75% of kids in a racing program race in order to sail, because racing's the offered path where they are. The 75% is where a ton of burnout and dropout occurs in racing-only programs. That doesn't mean that racing-only programs are bad. All it means is that if they're the only option, there will be kids in that because of that, and they will be ill-suited for it. Keeping teens in single or double-handed boats fails to address their evolving emotional, social, and intellectual needs. Teens need complexity, power in the boat, social construct, and help. They need to be introduced to more powerful boats, a larger crew, and they need to sail with adults on occasion. They need to learn that sailing is an adult activity that they're getting to do as teens, rather than a youth activity that they are about to age out of. So what do we do about this? More than the other two age levels, kids love just messing about in boats. Water fights, capsize drills, opti-tag. If Brent or Adam were in here, they'd be nodding their heads and saying, yes, we have to give them a good dose. And we know we have a responsibility to turn out good racers who will represent the club well. But we also know to keep these kids interested, we got to make it fun. That's the model that most community sailing programs work with, because they're not tied to the requirements that to be in the youth program, you represent the club on the race course. But even the most racing-oriented programs start the kids out with just messing about in boats. If you can, find a way to provide teens with access to more powerful boats, more complex boats, boats that require a team, and so the teens can enjoy the team concept. Nothing helps an awkward teen more than someone doing the social structuring for them, putting them on a team so they're forced to interact and they're given permission to interact. One of the most interesting facts, which I've alluded to a couple of times, is that if you do your own informal poll of all the sailors you know, the number of people, especially I bet in this room, who were in a family sailing construct as a child, that's a huge way to ensure that kids see sailing as something that they can do with their kids. And that's a big, a powerful psychological message. So I've got a couple of models for the community sailing, and I'll try and whip through those quickly. Alameda Community Sailing, that's not our official motto, but it's my motto for us. That's what Cammie Richards said to me when he lured me on the board. We want island residents to get out on the water, not just stroll by it or drive over or under it. While we serve adults and families, our main service is to youth. We have 2-week camps, primarily because we think it takes 2 weeks for a kid to really bond with sailing. Our campers reflect the diversity of our population in Alameda, both gender and ethnicity. In fact, we have slightly more girls than boys in camp. And we've grown 400% in 5 years, from 60 to 250 registrations since 2013. And we focus, after safety, of course, on one thing: create joyful experience in sailing for youth. We want them to be better and safer sailors, of course, but fun and joy first, learning second. Because there's so many great racing programs already, it's easy for us to, with our partners here at St. Francis, Encinal Yacht Club, Treasure Island, to refer kids who have that competitive streak. But we avoid racing because we get to, because there are so many great racing programs around. So that's our niche. We do have a ladder of improvement, but it's around leadership, self-reliance, communication, teaching, coaching, instructing, and mentoring. So from the newest, the youngest, to the probably the model, one of the models for the country, Treasure Island. Carissa Harris Adamson, Travis Lund, and the board of TISC have created an initiative that starts with the end in mind, Puddles to Podiums. Make a clear path for kids from entry to ensure they have the best chance to realize their dreams, whether competitive or otherwise. Part of that is properly introducing inner city kids to the water, as well as kids of means, and their relationship with the San Francisco School District is used by an example of community sailing around the country. And of course, Clipper Cove, you just can't beat that as a sailing location. So here's a couple of real quick things. Their credibility with the City of San Francisco is huge. This is a Department Children, Youth, and Families grant that they just were awarded, and another $43,000 from NOAA for their environmental Save the Sea by Sailing, I think it's called. Sailing to Save the Sea, sorry. And of course, they get regular donations from the kind people at the foundation. They have a serious focus on education, so science is woven into all their training, whether it's an official STEM course or not. And while they've trained 400 adults, they do so much more. They have dry storage for One Design sailors, open sailing days, boat rentals, hosting of One Design regattas, support of a racing team from a charter school. And all of that has built up for this huge new initiative. Who's familiar with this? Anyone? Anyone heard of it? Yes, a few of insiders. Does anyone know what the initials stand for, the acronym?
Come on, Pam, tell us.
Right, yes, exactly. And so the partners are U.S. Sailing, Oracle. I think the extent of their partnership, at least initially, will be that they donated their Olympic base for the infrastructure for this program. America's Cup base, right. What did I say? Oh, yeah, America's Cup base, sorry, my fault. And U.S. Sailing is deeply involved in this, up to and including moving their director of Olympic sailing out here, so he'll be near this sailing location. So just incredible amount of achievement in 20 years. So I think sailing is pretty healthy. I think it will become more obvious to more people as time goes on where the new wave of sailors is coming from. I think it's important for us in the industry and the community to measure success by participants, not by dollars. And remember that there's on-ramps for all three, and they are different: youth, adult, and family. And I'll just close by saying, if we follow these models, we'll help sailors of any age, any ethnicity, any gender find their joy in sailing. Thank you. Okay.
Welcome again to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, live from St. Francis Yacht Club. Our speaker today is Rich Jepsen, co-founder of the Olympic Circle Sailing Club, OCSC, and one of the top 5 in the country. So Rich, let me ask you, given that sailing is an obsolete form of transportation, why create a sailing school?
Well, if I was really good at archery when I was a kid, it would have been an archery school. I would say that my time at Annapolis Sailing School, even though I was teaching on the Chesapeake Bay in June, July, and August, and if you've sailed there, you know that you often say, gosh, if there was just a little more wind. I fell in love with teaching people. I knew sailing, so that's a no-brainer. So I wasn't going to teach them geophysics. But I knew sailing, and that was my vehicle that would allow me to connect and communicate with people.
Now, you didn't mention it, but you're actually the recipient of the Timothy Alar Award. Is that not also the case?
Yeah, yes. I was honored last year. Timmy Lar, 4-time Rolex Yachtswoman of the Year, and the woman who frightens me most at U.S. Sailing, but is a mentor of mine and a hero of mine, and it represents service to sailing instruction and sailing instructors.
So helicopter parents are frequently accused of overprotecting their kids. Tell me, how does sailing fit in the constellation of building personal confidence with kids? How does it work?
So if, you know, some exceptions being parents who actually buy a rib so they can follow their child around on the Opti circuit. Sailing does separate, by definition, it separates a kid from their parents. And I think that is a wonderful thing. Everyone in this room has the same story that, you know, we left with our, you know, sports equipment, whether it was sailing equipment or baseball equipment. We stayed out all day on our own until it was time to come home for supper. And that's the next time we saw our parents. And I think our society could do with a little bit more of that.
So what's the toughest part of running a sailing school?
Hiring. It wasn't so hard in, you know, late 2000 or in late 2008 because nobody had a job, and it was very easy to find former technology executives who needed a sailing school instructor job. But finding articulate, patient, empathetic, kind sailors who were really good at seamanship, not just making a boat go fast, but good at all facets of seamanship, that's a hard mining effort.
So why are sailing clubs out here called sailing schools on the East Coast? And talk about that.
So the West Coast sort of led the rest of the country in this whole idea of creating a commercial business around shared use of resources and training. So instead of just training them and saying, okay, we'll go buy your boat now, we said, hey, why don't we train you and mentor you and provide a home for you while you really find out what part of sailing do you like. Do you want to go to bareboat charter? Do you want to race a J105 on the bay? Which is it? And let's get you prepared for that, more than just learning how to sail, more than just being prepared on a certain boat, but sail a variety of boats.
So let's talk a little bit about the business model. What are the revenue streams for the business?
So we have a traditional membership, just like St. Francis. There's an initiation fee and monthly dues. And yes, those are, the initiation fee is 3 figures, not 5. And the monthly dues are 2 figures, not 3. But
What are the numbers?
$700 to join and $70 a month to be a member. And so that gives you access to discounts on training, access to our charter fleet, which we do reserve for members only. We're public access when it comes to training, but we require you to be a member to charter a boat. And the single biggest income stream revenue generator is membership. The sailing instruction is hard enough and expensive enough to do that it breaks even, and chartering and the membership are where we make our money.
And so what are the cost factors for you guys as a business?
Instructor wages, insurance for a sailing school, commercial sailing school, is a little bit higher than you might think. Rent for berths for 50 boats, insurance for 50 boats, 10,000 feet of club and office space they keep us on our toes, keep us selling.
50 boats. Talk about your fleet.
So almost half of them are J24s. So if you're wondering what happened to the J24 fleet, it's my fault. The rest are a whole variety of boats. So we go very similar with the J24 because we want new sailors to have consistency and knowability. And then as soon as they're trained, we want to change that into variety and fast boats. We have 105s, we have J80s, but we also have Beneteaus and Catalinas and Jeanneaus and a Hansa. So the whole idea is to make sure that they're exposed to all the main aspects of the sport so they really can decide for themselves what they like.
Talk about the demographics of membership.
It's because even though it's less expensive than St. Francis, it's still an expensive proposition. For somebody who really throws themselves into it, they're going to drop $4,000 to $5,000 their first year. So it's mostly professional people, mostly people between 30 and 60. But one thing that I'm really proud of is that 40% of our students are women, which isn't our demographic yet, but it's better than a lot of sailing. I'm sure that the women in the audience could suggest that. And also tremendously ethnically diverse. I think it really approaches the level of ethnic diversity that exists in the Bay Area.
So we're visiting today with Rich Jepsen, co-founder of the Olympic Circle Sailing Club, and we've got some questions from the audience. Paul Kamen.
Hi. I've been involved with Cal Sailing Club since 1973 when I hit town as a graduate student at UC Berkeley. In 1979, I became Commodore, and over the next couple of years, I took the club from a 300-member student and alumni-only organization to a 600-member public access club with our own 501c3 status and insurance and open to the public at large. So I've seen this work on a fairly large scale. CSC, I believe, still remains the only entry-level school using fast planing boats with ASIM spinnakers out on open San Francisco Bay.
That's right.
And I like to make the point that a 15-foot dinghy in 20 knots behaves pretty much the same as a 40-foot boat in 50 knots. But no one will let you practice with the 40-foot boat in 50 knots. But still, I think sometimes we're going into this through the wrong door. 2 facts. First of all, The real growth sector in small boating is paddlecraft. It's not sailing. There's conceptual simplicity. There's full participation right off the bat, especially important for youth groups that aren't part of a program but might do it just once or twice a summer. Also, as you pointed out, I think, but probably not emphasized enough, the difference in economics. The all-volunteer-based grassroots organization that springs up organically provides orders of magnitudes more opportunities for the same cost, whether that cost is borne by the user or by heavy subsidies from above. Right. So I've also been involved in an organization called Bay Access, which successfully got the water trail legislation through, and now waterfront land use planners and zoning jurisdictions have recognized the requirement to have a water access point in any waterfront development or land use plan. But we're still missing the mark in a big way, because water access to these planners usually just means a place to launch a kayak. What we're missing is on-site storage and space for a club to form. Because a water access point that requires schlepping your kayak or windsurfer or small paddlecraft to the site by car means you need to have a garage or a backyard to store the boat in. You need to have a car to transport it. And once you have your boat on top of a car, there are dozens of access points that are available to you. So where I think we really need to do some work is public policy, and insist that even though it's seen as a privatized use of Tideland's public trust and public waterfront, we need to insist that waterfront development include on-site storage, because this is where the clubs will ultimately come from. It starts as group ownership, and it builds into a club, and it builds into water access, which eventually feeds not just the paddlecraft world, but also the world of sailing small boats for the middle classes and the urban poor, frankly. So 2 questions. Do you agree with this?
Wait. Paul, are you counting? Are we counting?
2 questions. Do you agree with this, and why not?
Well, despite the fact that I'm wearing a blue blazer, our Bristol 27 was heavily mortgaged, and it was all that we could afford to have that family vacation. So I'm very appreciative of finding access points for people in the middle class, and especially the urban poor, and that's a ton of the work that we're doing at ACSC. And we're fighting with the city on that very thing, where we want to open up at Seaplane Lagoon, and the city's saying, well, we want to see all the sailboats sailing by. That's a great idea, but what do you mean you need to put them up on land when they're not being used? So I'm totally with you. I wish I could disagree with you, because that would be a great argument, but I'm totally on board.
Yes, a question at the front here. We're going to bring you to the mic. I'll ask a question. So, what's the customer life cycle like for your members? How do they start? Talk about the customer life cycle.
Good. So the median time that they spend is only about 5 years with us, but that includes the people who, and you know who they are because you've taken them sailing and it's been a disaster, who just say, it's cold, it's wet, I don't want to do this. They thought they did. Thank God they didn't buy a boat. But they leave in 6 months or a year. But our life cycle is pretty. We have probably 20% of our members who are boat owners and club members, because they own their boat for a very specific reason. They love owning a boat. They dote on their boat, and they want to sail something faster or slower or roomier or smaller than their boat on occasion.
So it's an auxiliary boat. They've got a boat and they have a different auxiliary boat, so they get a broader use of aquatic experience. Okay, right. Great. Pam Healy.
You mentioned leadership opportunities for youth. Could you give an example or elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, so when I first came to Alameda Community Sailing, it was run by a lot of really good sailors who had zero background in sail training. And so they were providing entry-level camps, which are simple to operate, but without any vertical development of their program. And so I said, if we're not going to race, then the first thing we need to do is make sure that the kids have a ladder of accomplishment. And so we take them, and for instance, my niece was made a CIT, or a counselor in training, because she's too young to be a CIT, but super eager. So she's a counselor in training, and then counselors in trainings, assistant instructors, and full instructors, and then camp leaders. And all the time we're working on developing their interpersonal skills so that they can be better leaders and more self-reliant.
Yes, how many members do you have in Olympic Circle Sailing Club?
1,100 right now. So it's been fairly stable for the past few years.
Another question from the audience. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, this is Patty from South Beach Yacht Club.
Hi, Patty.
Hi. So we have a year-long program, youth sailing program, most heavily developed in the summer, 8 weeks of summer camp. And each week we have 1 or 2 spots for scholarships. But finding students for the classes that are in need is really difficult. It's
Yes.
almost nearly impossible. And yet we have these openings and these opportunities, and you must have found the same challenge, and I'd like to hear some ideas.
Good. So I'll, because I know we're just about out of time, I'll keep it brief, and then maybe we can talk after. Number one, for community sailing centers, it's a little bit easier because they're mission focused, and they've learned to reach out beyond their orbit. Whereas yacht clubs tend to, and I don't know about South Beach, tend to be asking around their members and with their member newsletter and so on. So number one would be take a lesson from community sailing and start doing active outreach through schools, Boys and Girls Club, Girls Inc., and other service organizations. You'll find the kids.
How often do you go sailing a year?
I probably sail 25, 30 days a year.
Where do you market, and how do you market OCSC?
So 50% of our business is word of mouth. That's just the benefit of having been around for 30 some odd years and not treated too many people badly. But internet is by far the most powerful way. So we stopped magazine advertising 20 years ago and never missed a beat.
How often does the typical, or say median member at OCSC use a boat a year?
They average about once a month, I would say. There's some folks we only see 2 or 3 times a year, and there's some folks we see every week.
So it's been said that the GPA of collegiate sailors is higher than that of football players, golfers. What evidence do you have that that's not just our own, tinted glasses?
Right. No, I mean, it could be rose-colored glasses for sure.
I was hunting for them. It was a metaphor there somewhere.
Yes. I'm a poor example because I went into the sailing industry, and I think that's an IQ dropper if there ever was one. How many of you are in the sailing industry? Yeah, see? Nobody who belongs to the yacht club does that. He's just giving me 1 minute.
So on our five-person crew, IOD, I've been sitting here thinking, how many people have I introduced to sailing? And I think we sail a lot, 80 races a year, and I bet you the number can't be greater than 20 people a year. So I'd like to know how you guys feel about saying, congratulating somebody who's introduced 30,000 sailors to the game. Thank you, Rich. Thank you very much. What a great value. Thank you for coming and sharing your time with us. Our speaker today has been Rich Jepsen, co-founder of Olympic Circle Sailing Club. And with that, the luncheon is adjourned.
Thank you.